ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवती नैष्टिकी। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा। रीडिंग फ्रॉम श्रीमद् भागवतम। By His divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 22. Prithu Maharaj is meeting with Tukubaras. We are in the section text 17 to 40, where we see Sanat Kumaras are answering various questions by Maharaj Prithu. And yesterday we have seen these 7 beautiful qualities of the advanced devotees. Right. Now we come to text 25. हरेर्मुहुत्तत्परकर्णपूर गुणाभिधानेन विजृम्भ्यमानया भक्त्या हि सङ्गा सदात्मनि स्यात् निर्गणे ब्रह्मणि चञ्जसारति। Translation.
The devotee should gradually increase the culture of devotional service by constant hearing of the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These pastimes are like ornamental decorations on the ears of the devotees. By rendering devotional service and transcending the material qualities, one can easily be fixed in transcendence in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. This verse is especially mentioned to substantiate the devotional process of hearing the subject matter. A devotee does not like to hear anything other than subjects dealing with the spiritual activities or the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We can increase our propensity for devotional service by hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from realized souls. The more we hear from realized souls, the more we make advancement in our devotional life. The more we advance in devotional life, the more we become detached from the material world. The more we become detached from the material world, as advised by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the more we increase in attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, a devotee who actually wants to make progress in devotional service and go back home, back to Godhead, must lose interest in sense enjoyment and associating with persons who are after money and sense gratification. This is the advice of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. निष्किञ्चनस्य भगवद भजनोन्मुखस्य पारं परं जिगमिशोरभवसागरस्य सन्दर्शनं विषयिणाम् अथ योषितां च हन्त हन्त हा हन्त विषा भक्षणतो अपि असाधु चैतन्य चरितामृत मध्य लीला 11.8. The word Brahmani used in this verse is commented upon by the impersonalist or professional reciters of Bhagavatam, who are mainly advocates of the caste systems by demoniac birthright. They say that Brahmani means the impersonal Brahman, but they cannot conclude this with reference to the context of the words Bhaktya and Gunabhidhanena. According to the impersonalist, there are no transcendental qualities in the impersonal Brahman. Therefore, we should understand that Brahmani means in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as admitted by Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, wherever the word Brahma is used, it must refer to Krishna, not the impersonal Brahman effulgence. Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan iti Shabdate. Bhagavatam 1.2.11. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan can all be taken in total as Brahman, but when there is reference to the word bhakti or remembrance of the transcendental qualities, this indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not the impersonal Brahman. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Sanat Kumarji further says that the Hare Mahat, that the devotional service, a devotee should gradually increase the culture of devotional service by constantly hearing about the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Lord. And these are the real ornaments, the real earrings of a devotee, right? So, what is the earring of a devotee? What rings in the ears of the devotee, right? And that is, these are the beautiful pastimes of the Supreme Lord. These are the ornaments one should decorate one's ears. And thus, one will be fixed in Nirgune Brahmani Chanjasarati. One will be fixed in the attraction. Anjasa, Anjasa means very easily. Ratihi, attraction. Very easily one can have attraction towards the Supreme Lord. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that this verse is specifically mentioned to substantiate the process of hearing. Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Kalala Uday. So Shravana is extremely important, and this verse is describing about Shravana, activities of the Supreme Lord, and to be heard constantly. We increase our propensity for devotional service by hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from self realized souls. This is what the hearing is all about. Whenever we hear more about the Supreme Lord, we become detached from the material world and become attached to the Supreme Lord. So, this is specifically the result of hearing. What is the result of hearing? The result of hearing is two things. One is detachment from the material world and attachment to the Supreme Lord. Of course, again, Bhagavad Gita, the paradigm brings in here detachment doesn't mean irresponsibility, right? A devotee who actually wants to make progress should lose the interest in sense enjoyment and associating with persons who are simply after Bhoga Ishwarya Prasatana. And this is the recommendation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Srila Prabhupada quotes very beautiful verse here. Nishkinchanasya bhagavan bhajanonmukhasya param param jigimishor bhavasagarasya sandarshanam. Simply even the darshan of such a person. Sandarshanam, right? Vishayinam athayoshitamscha. So even ha hanta hanta, it says that better to drink poison vishabhakshanatopi api asadu instead of having association of such a asad. So what it means is basically one has to be careful about one's association, and association means where we are deriving our inspiration from and where we are sharing our happiness and distress. That is association. Later part of the purport, Srila Prabhupada focuses on the word Brahmani. So as soon as the word Brahmani is there, people will bounce upon, oh, Brahmani means it is by only to the Brahman, or it is only to by the Brahmanas. And Prabhupada says, no, that is not the case. Whenever there is a reference to devotional service, the word Brahmani means unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What to speak of Bhagavatam? Even Bhagavad Gita talks about Lord being Brahman. Param Brahma Param Dhama Pavitram Paramam Bhavan Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adidevam Ajam Vibhu Ahustvam Rishyah Sarve. So Brahma doesn't mean that one should not get a shock like Brahma, which happens to the Mayavadi philosopher. They are just looking forward, Brahm, and then immediately they will conclude, oh, Nirguni, Brahmani means, So Prabhupada says, whenever there is, reference to devotional service, the word Brahmani means unto the Supreme Lord. Although the same Lord can be referred in Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, the three features of the Absolute. Text 26. यदा रतिर्ब्रह्मणि नैष्ठिकी पुमान् आचार्यवान् ज्ञानगिरागरंहसा दह्यन्ति वीर्यं हृदयं जीवकोशम् पञ्चात्मकं योनिमवृत्तिथोऽग्निः. Translation.
Translation: Upon becoming fixed in his attachment to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by the grace of the spiritual master and by awakening knowledge and detachment, the living entity, situated within the heart of the body and covered by the five elements, burns up his material surroundings exactly as fire arising from wood burns the wood itself. Purport: It is said that both the Jivatma, the individual soul, and the Paramatma live together within the heart. In the Vedic version, it is stated, Hridaya Ayam Atma. The soul and supersoul both live within the heart. The individual soul is liberated when it comes out of the material heart or cleanses the heart to make it spiritualized. The example given here is very appropriate. Yonim ivotitho gniha, agni or fire comes out of wood, and by it the wood is completely destroyed. Similarly, when a living entity increases his attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is to be considered like fire. A blazing fire is visible by its exhibition of heat and light. Similarly, when the living entity within the heart becomes enlightened with full spiritual knowledge and detached from the material world, he burns up his material covering of the five elements earth, water, fire, air, and sky, and becomes free from the five kinds of material attachments, namely ignorance, false egoism, attachment to the material world, envy, and absorption in material consciousness. Therefore, Pancha, Panchatmakam, as mentioned in this verse, refers to either the five elements or the five coverings of the material contamination. When these are all burned into ashes by the blazing fire of knowledge and detachment, one is fixed firmly in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless one takes shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and advances one's attraction for Krishna by the spiritual master's instructions, the five coverings of the living entity cannot be removed from the material heart. The living entity is centered within the heart, and to take him away from the heart is to liberate him. This is the process. One must take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, and by his instruction, increase one's knowledge in devotional service, become detached from the material world, and thus become liberated. An advanced devotee, therefore, does not live within the material body but within his spiritual body, just as a dry coconut lives detached from the coconut husk, even though within the husk. The pure devotee's body is therefore called Chinmaya Saritra, spiritualized body. In other words, a devotee's body is not connected with material activities, and as such, a devotee is always liberated, Brahma Bhuya Kalpate, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14.26. Sri Rupa Goswami also confirms this. Iha yasya harera dasye karmana manasagriha nikhilasva api avastasu jivan mukta cha uchyate. Whatever his condition may be, one who is engaged fully with his body, mind, and speech in the service of the Lord is liberated even within this body. Hare Krishna.
Here, Sanat Kumarji refers to the result of attachment to the Supreme Lord. Upon becoming fixed in his attachment to the Supreme, by the grace of the spiritual master and by awakening the knowledge and detachment, what happens? The living entity, he becomes detached from the five elements, Pancha Tattva, and burns up the material coverings, which is like, exactly like as the fire arising from the wood burns from itself. Okay. So living entity is utilizing the body which is made up of the Pancha Mahabhut. And by using the body made up of Pancha Mahabhut, there will be arisal of the Agni. That Agni is the devotional service, and which will eventually burn the body itself, means one will be completely awakened and one will rise above the bodily consciousness of life. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that both soul and the super soul, they live in the core of the heart. Samana vrikshe, riddheshe arjuna tishtati. That where is the soul? Soul is there always in the heart. Right? Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto, mattah smrtir jnanam apohanam cha. So the super soul is there in the heart, the soul is also residing in the heart. Right? And the super soul is liberated. Of course, he is the Supreme Lord and he is completely liberated. But the living entity is entrapped and thinking of enjoying the fruits through the body. And the body is made up of pancha tattva, like pancha bhautika. That is how the body is made up of. And by using this body, which is made up of the five elements, when there is arousal of devotional service, then bhasmasat kurute Arjuna, just like Bhagavad Gita talks about this. Prabhupada says the blazing fire is visible by heat and light. Similarly, when the living entity within the heart becomes enlightened by the spiritual knowledge and detachment from the world, he burns up the material coverings which are made up of Bhumi Rapo Anulo Vayu Kham. And thus he becomes completely freed from five kinds of material attachment. Which are these five kinds of material attachment? These are called as five ways. Ignorance, that is avidya. False ego, that is ahankara. Then there is attachment to the material world, asakti. And then there is envy. What is envy? Say. And then there is absorption in the material consciousness, that is abhinivesha. I'm just missing the one word. So then there is abhinivesha. Okay. And this is panchatattvakam. These are the five things. Panchatmakam, these are completely destroyed by arising of devotional service. And this is possible by taking the due shelter of the bona fide spiritual master and following the process of devotional service. Srila Prabhupada writes that advanced devotee, they are Jivan Muktaha Sauchyate. The example given is the dry coconut. Although the dry coconut may be inside the coconut shell, but sometimes you just allow it, make it move, and then gada gada gada, it will make a sound. Although it is inside the shell, it is completely detached from the shell. Similarly, advanced devotee, again, this is progressive with at least 35, 40 years of devotional service, right? It is nothing to be imitated or nothing to be quickly acted upon, but it is to be understood. Such a personality, where his body is completely engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord, he becomes Jivan Muktaha Sa Uchyate. And therefore, Prabhupada says, a devotee's body is called as Brahma Bhuya. No, this is not. This is spiritualized body, Chinmaya Sharira. And that's why such a personalities, they are even, there is always a samadhi of such a personality because that Sharira has become Chinmaya Sharira. And even within living in this life, he is Jivan Muktaha Sauchyate. He is Jivan Muktaha. Text 27. दग्धाशयो मुक्तसमस्ततद्गुणो नैवात्मनो बहिरन्तविचिष्टे परात्मनो यत् व्यवधानपुरस्तात् स्वप्ने यथा पुरुष तद्विनाशे. Translation.
When a person becomes devoid of all material desires and liberated from all material qualities, he transcends distinction between action executed externally and internally. At that time, the difference between the soul and the supersoul, which was existing before self-realization, is annihilated. When a dream is over, there is no longer distinction between the dream and the dreamer. Purport. As described by Srila Rupa Goswami, Anyabhilashita Shunyam, one must be devoid of all material desires. When a person becomes devoid of all material desires, there is no longer need for speculative knowledge or fruitive activities. In that condition, it is to be understood that one is free from the material body. The example is already given above. A coconut which is dry is loosened from its outward husk. This is a stage of liberation. As said in Srimad Bhagavatam 2.10.6, Mukti, liberation, means Swarupena Vyavasthiti, being situated in one's own constitutional position. All material desires are present as long as one is in the bodily concept of life. But one realizes that he is an eternal servant of Krishna, His desires are no longer material. A devotee acts in this consciousness. In other words, when in connection with the body are finished, one is actually liberated. When one is liberated from the material qualities, he does not do anything for his personal sense gratification. At that time, all activities are performed by him are absolute. In the conditioned state, there are two kinds of activities. One acts on the behalf of the body, and at the same time, he acts to be liberated. The devotee, when he is completely free from all material desires or all material qualities, transcends the transcends the duality of action for the body and soul. Then the bodily concept of life is completely over. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami says, Iha yasya harir dasya karmana manasa gira nikhilasva pi avasthasu jivan mukta sa uchyate. When one is completely fixed in the service of the Lord, he is a liberated person in any condition of life. He is called Jivan Mukta, liberated even within this body. In such a liberated condition, there is no distinction between action for sense gratification and action for liberation. When one is liberated from the desires of sense gratification, he has no longer to suffer the reactions of lamentation or illusion. Activities performed by the karmis and jnanis are subjected to lamentation and illusion. But self-realized, liberated person acting only for the Supreme Personality of Godhead experiences none. This is the stage of oneness or merging into the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This means that the individual soul, while keeping his individuality, no longer has separate interests. He is fully in the service of the Lord, and he has nothing to do for his personal sense gratification. Therefore, he sees only the Supreme Personality of Godhead and not himself. His personal interest completely perishes. When when a person comes out of a dream, the dream vanishes. While dreaming, a person may consider himself a king and see the royal paraphernalia, his soldiers, etc. But when the dream is over, he does not see anything beyond himself. Similarly, a liberated person understands that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, acting in accordance with the desire of the Supreme Lord. And as such, there is no distinction between himself and the Supreme Lord, although both of them retain their individuality. Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. This is the perfect conception of oneness in relation to the super soul and the soul. Hare Krishna.
Now, text 27, result of destruction of the subtle body. So it is saying Dagdhashayo, when it is Dagdha, and the person becomes devoid of the material desires and becomes liberated from material qualities, he transcends the distinction between what is to be executed externally and internally. At that time, there is no difference between the soul and super soul from the perspective of interest. Previously, the soul is conditioned, and soul is thinking that his activities, his enjoyment is different, and therefore activities are external and different. But when the soul realizes he is the part and parcel of the super soul, then his activities become one with the Supreme, one with the mission of the Lord. And thus, Prabhupada says, when a dream is over, there is no longer a distinction between dream and the dreamer. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains Rupa Goswami's verse, Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karma Adi Anavritam. So, the bigger question is why we act. Why we act? Because we have a wrong identity. What is the wrong identity? I am this body. Now, and based on the different sub identities, I am this body, then I am male or female, I'm born in this country or that country, I'm born in this particular distinction, that particular distinction, and then there are so many duties created for such a living entity, right? But when abhilasha, anya abhilasha is shunyam, when there is no other desire than to follow the plan of the Supreme Lord, then what happens is there is no longer a distinction between speculative knowledge or creative action. Right. So the example given in the previous purport of the coconut, which is completely dried and separated from the outer shell. So although it is within the shell, but it is completely dried up. Similarly, such a devotee, although he is in the material world, but is not part of the material world. In Bhagavad Gita, there is another analogy. Padma Patra Ivambhasa, right? That Pankaja is part of the mud, right? It is in the mud, but it is not affected by the mud. And such a personality is called as Jivan Mukta. Srila Prabhupada consecutively quotes this shloka. Ihahas yasya harer dase karmana manasa gira nikhilashvapi avasthasu Jivan Mukta sauchyate. That one who is fully realized and engaging his body, mind, and speech in the service of the Lord is completely liberated. Jivan Muktaha, although he is within the same body. Further, Srila Prabhupada describes that based on the modes of the material nature, there is activities of the body and there is activities of the soul. So activities of the body are called as Sharira Dharma and activities of the soul are called as Nitya Dharma. And to the degree there is no distinction between the two, right? When the Nitya Dharma will completely prevail, and this is how all his activities will become the activities of pure devotional service. Like for example, we are a grahastha, most of us joining here, and we have some activities, and we spiritualize those activities. But just imagine somebody who is a brahmachari or a sannyasi. Now, he doesn't spiritualize the activities; his activities are spiritual in themselves. And of course, both are important, spiritualizing the activities and the spiritual activities, but still there is a distinction. But to the degree we follow our, the Varnashram very well, progressively, as and age appropriate position, we increase our, the affection to the Supreme Lord, attraction towards the Supreme Lord, Brahmani Rati, and become slowly detached from the material world and come to the platform of offering everything, at 55, 60, whatever, 65, we become to that platform. And now no more material activities. We want to dedicate our life fully for the spiritual activities. So then there is no difference between Nitya Dharma and Sharira Dharma. There is no need to spiritualize the activities, which is of course a very important process when one is going through that phase. But activities, they directly become the spiritual activities, right? And such a personality is called as Jivan Muktaha Sauchyate. There is no distinction between the actions for sense gratification and actions for liberation. They just become the actions for liberation. And then Srila Prabhupada describes more detail about the stage of oneness, merging into the Supreme. So Brahmani merging has nothing to do with the soul and super soul becoming one. No. Of course, they become one in interest while retaining the individuality. So Prabhupada describes this, that Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman. Although Kshara Chakshara Evacha, and there is beyond Uttamascha, the Lord is beyond Kshara, beyond Akshara, and still he. So this is not about the merging, doesn't mean becoming one with the Supreme. Merging means becoming one with the desire of the Supreme. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank
Hare
you,
Krishna.
Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhupada.
Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.